automate tasks in Excel. .xlsb. This file extension is used for Excel workbooks that are stored in a binary format. This format is not as compatible with other versions of Excel. .xltx. This file extension is used for Excel templates created in Excel 2007 or later. Templates are workbooks that can be used to create new workbooks. .xltm. This extension is used for Excel templates that contain macros. Before we get started with the interface and navigation in Excel, let us talk about the templates that Excel provides. So when you click on File and then Home, you can see that there are various templates. Now, if you go to the New tab, you can see some templates that you can easily use with a single click. Now from here, if you go to the New tab over here, you can see furthermore templates categorized based on the use and application. Now, for example, if you want to use Excel to analyze your budget, you can click on this Budget tab and it will open up a wide range of options for you to choose from. And if you still don't find what you're looking for, you have the search option here. So now let's go back. However, if you are still not able to find the template that you are looking for, you have the search option here where you can type in the kind of template that you are looking for. For example, let's say I'm looking for a template to create a to-do list. So I will type it here. And I'm sure that it already has some templates that can help me with that. Suppose I want the teacher's to-do list that is shown over here. So I will click on that and then click on Create. As you can see here, this opens a new workbook and it already has a default name which you can change as per your requirement. Now, apart from this, you can also create your own custom template, which we'll cover later in the course. Now let me close this for the time being and let us move on to the Excel interfaces and navigation. The interface of Microsoft Excel is divided into several parts. First one is the ribbon, which is the main toolbar in Excel. This upper portion that you see over here is the ribbon. And the ribbon contains a number of tabs that organizes various commands and features of Excel. Let us go through these one by one. The Home tab is the one that is open by default and you can see the various commands that are listed here. This Home tab is generally used for working with data such as formatting, editing and sorting. The next one is the Insert tab. This tab contains the commands for inserting objects into a worksheet such as charts, pictures, and text boxes. Then comes the page layout. This contains the commands for formatting a worksheet such as setting page margins and printing and things like that. Then if we go to the Formulas tab, this has the formulas and functions that we can use to manipulate our data. Then is the Data tab here. And just so that you are aware, I am just giving a very high level overview as the options and commands under each tab is very extensive and going through each one of them would take a lot of time. However, you can explore it yourself and take your time to understand each command. So coming back, the tab contains the commands for working with data such as sorting, filtering and importing data from other sources. The Review tab contains the commands for reviewing and protecting a worksheet such as checking spelling and grammar. You can also add comments, which when working with multiple people is very handy because you can put your thoughts in the worksheet as comments which the other collaborators can go through. Then we have the View tab where we have the commands for changing the view of a worksheet, such as zooming in and out, hiding rows and columns, etc. And then we have the Help tab, which we can use to take help when working on Excel. If you click on Help over here, you can see the Help panel opening on the right. You can put any query you have in the search bar. Suppose I want to find out the syntax of any formula, say VLOOKUP. So I will type in VLOOKUP syntax. And you can see that it helps us with the syntax using different examples. Now suppose I want to learn how to protect my worksheet. So let me first delete this and then type protect worksheet. And hit enter. You can see here that it provides me with the steps on how to perform this task. Another interesting part of this Help tab is the Show Training option, which provides you with some training videos as well that you can play to understand the concepts better. So this was a quick overview of the various tabs in Excel. Now the next is the Quick Access toolbar. The Quick Access toolbar is a small toolbar that is located at the top of the Excel window. It can be customized to include the commands that you use most often. For that, you can click here and you can see that some of the commands are checked, and those are the ones that are listed here, such as autosave, save, undo and redo. So as per your need, you can add more commands here by checking those commands, or even remove those by unchecking them. And these are the ones that are listed outside for quick access. So you can make use of the Quick Access toolbar to add the commands that you use the most. Now let us talk about Worksheet. It is the main area of the Excel window. It is where you enter and edit data, create formulas and charts. As you can see here, a worksheet is made up of rows and columns. Rows are horizontal and columns are vertical. The intersection of a row and a column is called a cell. Here in the upper left corner of the Excel window, what you see is the name box. It displays the name or the address of the active cell. For example, this cell is at the intersection of F column and the 8th row. So the name box would display F8. You can use the name box to type and navigate directly to a particular cell. Just type in the address of the cell here. For example, if I want to navigate to D25, I will type in D25 and press enter. And you can see that it has directly taken me to that cell. Now next to the name box is the formula bar. It is used to enter and edit formulas and values in cells. So to understand that, consider the data that I have entered here, which displays the marks of a student in different subjects. We also have calculated the total marks secured by the student by adding the marks obtained in these 3 subjects: English, Mathematics and Science. Now when I click on the cell and when you look at the formula bar, you can see the formula that has been used to perform this calculation. You can also double click on the cell to display the formula. So you can see that both the formula bar and the cell show the same formula. Now if you want to edit the formula, you can do it either from the cell over here, or you can go to the formula bar to perform the edits. Now for example, I want to calculate the sum of only 2 subjects, that is English and Mathematics, and exclude Science. I can make the change to the cell range. So currently you can see that it performs the calculation across the cells from F8 to F10. Now I would change that to F8 to F9. You can see that as I change the range over here, the selection changes accordingly. So now it is considering only these 2 cells and it has recalculated the total. The formula bar also displays the results of formulas. Now moving on, the bar that is located here at the bottom of the Excel window is the status bar. It displays information about the current state of the Excel workbook, such as the current zoom level, the page layout, workbook statistics, and so on. Also, if you have some values entered into your worksheet like we have over here, and if you select that, you can directly have a view of some of the calculations such as the average, count, sum. Now, if you want, you can also customize the status bar to add or remove the information that is displayed on it. For example, along with the average and sum that is already being displayed, I also want to display the maximum value. For that, right-click on it and select the options that you want to display. The ones that are checked in the list are the ones that are already being displayed, and you would be able to see that based on the data that is present on your worksheet. Now, as I said, I also want to display the maximum value. So for that, all I have to do is just check this option. Now you can see that the maximum value is also being displayed in the status bar. To summarize, the Excel interface is designed to be user-friendly and intuitive. The ribbon and the quick access toolbar make it easy to find the commands that you need, and the name box and the formula bar make it easy to enter and edit data and formulas. The worksheet is the main area where you work with data, and the status bar provides information about the current state of the workbook. Now, as we said, a worksheet is a place where you enter and manipulate or work on your data. And this worksheet is contained in a workbook. So by default, there is one worksheet, or in some cases 3 worksheets present in a workbook. Here you can see that in this case we have just one worksheet that I get when I open this workbook. But you can add more worksheets to it by clicking on this plus here. Now, if you right click on any particular sheet, you get a lot of options to perform on that sheet. For example, if you click on Insert, you get the options to insert another worksheet, chart, etc. Then you have the delete option to delete the sheet. You can also rename the sheet by clicking here or double clicking on the sheet's name. For example, I would rename it as Working Sheet. So it's renamed now. Now if I right click again, you can see more options like move or copy. For example, if you want to move a copy of this worksheet, you can check this box, create a copy. Then you can select as to where you want your worksheet to be placed or moved. So if I select move to end, you can see that a copy of this worksheet, that is the working sheet, has been created and it has been placed at the end of this series of sheets. Now another option is to add color to the worksheet tab. For example, if I want to change the tab color to orange, I can select orange from this color palette. Now you can see that this sheet tab has been highlighted in orange. Next, you have the option to select all sheets and hide one or more sheets in a workbook. Then this link to this sheet option will give you a link to the sheet that you can share with others for a single click access to this sheet. Finally, if you go to show changes, you can see what all changes have been done to your worksheet and by whom. Now let us talk about protecting a worksheet. For that, as we have already seen, there is a protect sheet option. Now if I click on this, you can see that we have the option to set a password that should be used to unprotect this sheet. Below this, we have a list of actions that we can allow the users to have by checking the boxes against them. So for example, we can see that a user that opens this password protected sheet, they are able to only select both locked and unlocked cells. Now apart from this, if I want the user to be able to also perform sort, I will check this box and click OK, which will allow the user to perform sorting activities on the data in the sheet. I hope that now you have a pretty good idea about the options you have that you can perform on a worksheet. Now, another way to protect the workbook is to go to File, go to Info, and you have the Protect Workbook option over here. Now, here are some additional tips for navigating through Excel. One of the quickest ways to perform an action, be it calculation or navigation, is to use the keyboard shortcuts. There are many keyboard shortcuts that Excel offers, and you can find a list of these shortcuts in the Excel help documentation. For that, you can go to the Help tab, click on Help over here. Here you can type in keyboard shortcuts. Once you select this, you can see a list of keyboard shortcuts for different Office applications, and here is the one for keyboard shortcuts in Excel. I will click on this, and as I scroll down, I can see a list of keyboard shortcuts that I can use, which will definitely make my execution faster. Alternatively, you can use the Alt key to display the shortcut keys for the ribbon commands. Next handy feature of the Excel interface is the zoom feature, which can be used to zoom in and out of a worksheet. This can be helpful for navigating to specific cells or for viewing large amounts of data. You can also use the navigation pane to navigate to different sheets and cells in a workbook. To go to the navigation pane, click on the View tab and then click on the navigation pane button over here. Here you can see the list of worksheets that are a part of this workbook. Under each worksheet, you can see different range of cells which has data in it. So if I click here, it takes me to the cell range which has the total calculated. If I click here, it takes me to this range of cells. So with this, you can directly navigate through the workbook. So from this worksheet, if I click here, I directly move to the working sheet 2. This way, it helps me to quickly move to the desired sheet and cells. Apart from these, as we have already seen with the help of the Quick Access toolbar, which we can customize to include the shortcuts that we use most often, we can easily access the shortcuts without having to remember them. Let us now explore the formulas and functions in Excel. So, as we have seen here, formulas are mathematical expressions used to calculate values in cells. And cell references are used to identify cells in formulas. For example, you can see that the formula in this cell is sum of the values in the cells ranging from F8 to F10. If you look over here, you would understand that the cell references are made up of column letters and row numbers. In our formula, F8 is the starting cell, which is the intersection of column F and row number 8. So when you create a formula, you can use cell references to identify the cells that you want to include in the calculation. There are 3 types of cell references: relative, absolute, and mixed. To understand these, let us go to sheet 4, where I have copied some data to understand these concepts better. Let us start with relative cell references. So consider this data, which is a data on pizza orders in different branches. Let us first start with performing a little formatting on this data so that it looks more presentable. For this, what I will do is, I will select the header and make it center aligned by going to the alignment option under the Home tab and then clicking on this, which will center align it. Then I will select all of it and add border to it. For that, I'll go to Borders and then choose the type of border that I would want to apply. Right now, I will choose all borders, which would apply borders to all the cells. Now, as you can see here, the header is not completely visible. So whenever you see that the entry in a cell is not completely visible, you can expand the cell by grabbing the end of that particular column by pressing the left key on the mouse and extending it as needed. Or you can just double click on the right end of that particular column and it automatically expands or collapses according to the entries in that column. Similarly, let me do for column I as well. So now we are able to see all the data. Now let us look at what relative cell reference is. So in a relative cell reference, the formula changes when it is copied from one cell to another. For example, here we have the quantity sold for each type of pizza at a particular branch. Along with that, we also have the price per quantity. Now suppose I want to find the total price. For that, I will create a new column with the header total price and hit enter. Let me just expand it a bit so that it is completely visible. Now to calculate the total price, we need to first apply a simple multiplication. So I will multiply the value in column L, that is the quantity, with the value in column M, which is the price per quantity. Now I'll hit enter. So if I click on this cell and look at the formula bar, it shows L8 times M8. So this is the calculation for row number 8. Now there are different ways of copying a formula from one cell to another. One way is to do a Ctrl C, that is copy, and Ctrl V paste. You can see that the cell references have changed. Here the cell references were L8 and M8, but when the same formula is copied to another cell, it gets changed according to the cell's row and column. So here in this case it is L9 and M9. Another way to copy a formula across cells is to left click and hold when the plus sign appears when hovering over the bottom right corner of the cell and pull them down to as many cells as needed. And another way is to go to the last cell, do a Ctrl Shift up arrow so that it lands on the last filled cell, and then do a Ctrl D, which would copy the data of formula in that cell to all the highlighted cells below. Now you can see that as I go through each cell, the cell references have changed based on the row and column of that particular cell. So that is relative cell reference. Let us now move on to absolute cell references. So in an absolute cell reference, the cell references do not change when the formula is copied to another cell. For example, I want to make the references in this cell, that is L8 and M8, to absolute references. To do that, what you have to do is add a $sign before the row or column or both as per your requirement to lock that thing. So for example, in this case, if I want to lock only the row, I will add a $sign before that is 8. And if it is the column that I would want to lock, I'll add a $sign before the column, that is L. And as I said, if I want to lock both rows and columns, I'll add $sign before the row as well as the column reference. So to do that, click on the cell reference and press F4. This will lock the complete cell reference. I'll do the same for this as well. So now we have locked the complete formula. Now if I copy this formula to the cells below, for that press Ctrl Shift down arrow, which will select all the cells in that column with data. Now I will do a Ctrl D to copy the content that is present in the first cell of the selection. Now when I click on each cell, and if you look at the formula bar, you can see that the cell references have not changed when we copied the formula across these rows. This is because we have locked the references here, and this is what is called the absolute cell reference. Finally, we have the mixed cell references. Mixed cell references are a combination of relative and absolute cell references. To demonstrate it, let me first revert the last changes. So you can see that the formula has been reinstated to how it was earlier. Here you can see that column M has prices for different types of pizzas. Now consider a scenario where the price is static and is the same for any type of pizzas. Suppose that the price is 8, so I will leave 8 here in the cell M8 and delete the rest. Now to calculate the total price for each type of pizza sold, I have to simply multiply the total quantity sold per pizza type with 8. That means in our formula, the cell reference for quantity changes, but the cell reference for price remains static. Here we can see that the first calculation holds good, but as we move down the rows, we can see that the cell reference for price changes as per the row, and this gives the total price as 0, which is wrong. Now to fix that, what we can do is, we can go to cell N8 and lock the cell M8 as we want that to be constant across all rows. So I will press F4. Now if I press F4 again, it will lock only the row, that is 8. If I press it again, it will lock only the column. And finally, when I press it once more, it unlocks both the row and column references. So I will click on it once again to lock the cell reference. I'll hit enter. Now I will copy it to the cells below just like I did last time. Control Shift down arrow to highlight all the filled cells below it. And then Control D to copy the formula. Now if you look at the formula bar, it shows L8 multiplied by M8. Below that is L9 multiplied by M8, L10 by M8 and so on. So this way one of the components in the formula is fixed. Only the first value in this formula changes because that is still a relative reference. The second value doesn't change since that is a fixed reference now. And a combination of absolute and relative cell reference is called a mixed cell reference. So to conclude, cell references can be used to create formulas that calculate values, perform logical operations, and reference data in other worksheets or workbooks, which we'll look into in a while. These can be simple like we saw here or complex. Now let us talk about functions. So functions are built-in formulas that perform specific tasks. Now there are a few ways to find the syntax of a function in Excel that you would like to work on but do not know exactly how to use it. One of the ways is to go to the Help tab, which we saw earlier. So go to the Help here and then search for the function that you want. For example, you can say syntax for sum function, and Excel will help you with that. Let me close this as of now. Another way is to use the Insert function dialog box. For that, go to the Formulas tab. Now first you have to click on the cell where you want to insert this function. Then click on the Insert function button. You can see that as soon as we click the Insert function, an equal to sign appears in the selected cell. So, here it says that you can search for a function. So you can type in a brief description of what you are looking for. There are also some frequently used functions listed over here. Other than that, there are functions classified into categories based on their usage, which makes it easy for the user to search. For example, you have categories such as financial, date and time, mathematics and trigonometry, and things like that. So you can select the particular category based on the function that you are looking for and then go further. Right now I have selected all. Let us go back to the most recently used. Now say for example, I want to find the maximum or the largest value in a given set of values. So I will select this and click on OK. Now here it asks for the range. Here it has automatically picked the range N8 to N16. This is exactly the range that I need. But if this is not the case, all you have to do is just go to the first cell and drag it across the rest of the cells. That's it. And click on OK. So here you can see that it has found that 1800 is the largest number in this range. Another way to find a function is formula autocomplete. For that, what you have to do is, you have to just start typing the name of the function in a cell. For example, I want to change the branch name from sentence case to all uppercase. For this, what I will do is, I will type equal to, and then since I have a fair idea of what that function would be, I will start typing upper. So UPP, and you can see that it is already being listed here along with a short description of what this function does. So it says convert a text string to all uppercase letters. So I will hit tab. So now you can see that the function is selected and we can also see the syntax of it, which says text. So as the argument for this function, I will select the cell which I want to convert to uppercase and then hit enter. So you can see that California is now converted to uppercase. Now if you want the whole range to be converted, that is also equally effortless. Just click on upper, tab, and here as the argument, instead of a single cell, you can provide a whole range of cells. So here I have selected a range of cells and hit enter. So it says that because there were multiple values that were selected, it has spilled across multiple cells. So this is how you can look for a function that you want to apply on your data. There are many Excel functions to perform various calculations and data manipulation. But in this section, we will be looking at some of the most popular ones. For that, let me first go to the sales worksheet where you can see that there is data similar to what we looked at earlier. But here we have few more rows of data. The first one that we are going to look at is sum. This function, as the name suggests, is to calculate the sum or total of given values. So suppose I want to find the total quantity here. For that, I'll go to cell H36, first type an equal to sign, and then start typing sum. We can see that the function appears here. Now I'll hit tab, and as its argument, it asks for the numbers that can be entered manually, or you can provide individual cell references or provide a range of cells. In this case, I will be providing a range of cells starting from H3 to here, that is H34. Then I will hit enter. So that's how you can make use of the sum function. Next, let us look at the count function. This function counts the number of cells in a range that contains numbers. So let us first try the count function for column E. As you can see, it has alphanumeric entries. It has both alphabets and number. Let us see if it would work for this. So I will type in count and then select this cell range from E3 to E34. When I press enter, you can see that it has returned the value as 0. This is because it could not find any cell with only numeric entries. Now let us try this function for column H. So here I will again type in equal to count and this time give the range as H3 to H34. As I hit enter, we can see the result as 32. That means there are 32 numerical entries in the column H from rows 3 to 34. So this is how the count function works. The next function that we are going to look at is average. This function calculates the average of the values in a range of cells. Suppose we want to find the average quantity sold per order. So for that, when I type in equal to and then AV, you can see the functions starting with AV are getting listed. The function that we want to use here is average. So I will click on this. Now again, I will give the range of cells for which I need to calculate the average as its argument. Now I will press enter. So you can see the average quantity sold per order is approximately 135. Next we have the max function. This function returns the maximum value in a range of cells. If I want to find out the maximum quantity sold, I will use the max function starting with an equal sign. And then give the range from which I want to find the highest value, that is H3 to H34, and then enter. The output shows that 239 is the highest quantity sold for an order number in the list provided. Similarly, the min function returns the minimum value in a range of cells. Next is if. This function allows you to create conditional formulas. For example, if I want to find out the order numbers where the quantity sold is over 150 and add a remark as good, I can use the if function for that. Now, if you want to edit an entry in a cell, you can either double click on that cell or press F2. So now, as I said, for the line items that have sold over 150 pizzas, I want to add good under the remarks column. So as always, to use the function, start with an equal sign, type in if and hit tab. Here you can see what the syntax of the if function looks like. So the first argument here is the logical test. So our logical test here is if the quantity which is in H3 for this row is greater than 150, comma, and then we move on to the second argument. For that, enter the value that you want to display if the result of the logical test is true. That is, if the value being compared is greater than 150. Now the final argument is the value to be displayed if the result of the logical test is false. In this case, I do not want to show anything, so I will leave it as it is and close the bracket and hit enter. Now you can see here, the quantity in the first row is 122, which is less than 150, and since we did not define any value that should be displayed, it is showing 0 here. Now I will copy this to the cells below by dragging this. We can see that in some of the cells it shows the name error. The reason for this is that the text message that we want to display must be enclosed in double quotes. I missed that here, so let me just add that. Now I will do a Ctrl-Shift down arrow to highlight the cells below and then do a Ctrl-D to copy this change to all the cells below. Now we can see that for the line items where the order quantity is greater than 150, the remark column shows good. So this is the way you can use the if function to test a particular condition. Next, we are going to look at one of the most used or the most important functions, which is the VLOOKUP function. The VLOOKUP function is very helpful. What does it do? It searches for a value in a table and returns the corresponding value from another column in the table. It sounds complicated. Let me show how it works. Suppose I want to find the price per quantity for each type of pizza. Now I have this data in this worksheet, which is the product details. So if I go over here, you can see that it has the price for each type of pizza. Now, if we were to do this manually, we will have to search for each pizza type. For example, BBQ chicken, note its value. So here it is 16, and then enter that value in the other worksheet. So I need to go back to the sales worksheet, look for BBQ chicken here, and then add that value here. This process is definitely very time consuming and also error prone. As opposed to what we see here, if this data contained thousands of rows, you can imagine the time and effort that would be needed to perform this activity. So in cases like these, VLOOKUP comes very handy. So let's see how it works. So I will go to this cell, type equal to, and then type VLOOKUP. It has already popped up here. Press tab. As you can see here, the first argument is the lookup value, which is the pizza type. So I will select the cells G3 to G34, comma. Now the next argument is the table array. Our table is in the product details worksheet. So we will go over here and select the table and then a comma. Now the next argument is column index number. This is the number of the column Excel must count over, starting from the first column selected to find the column that contains the value that we want to retrieve. In this case, the index should be 2, 1, 2. So I will put 2 and then a comma again. Finally, the last argument, that is the range lookup, we will put 1, which is the approximate match. Close the bracket and hit enter. You can see here that it has automatically populated the cells below. So now we have the price based on the type of pizza mentioned in column G. We can see that Pizza is 8, Extravaganza is 8, BBQ chicken is 16, and if we go to the product details, we can verify the same data here to conclude that the information has been correctly updated. So just with the use of one Excel function, we can look for values from other worksheet, or you could even look up values from other workbooks. Similarly, there is another function called HLOOKUP. VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup and HLOOKUP stands for horizontal lookup. So this function searches for a value in a table and returns the corresponding value from another row in the table, whereas VLOOKUP returns corresponding value from another column in a table. So in this video, we looked at the sum function, count, average, maximum or minimum, the if function and the VLOOKUP function. Now, whenever you perform calculations using Excel functions, you would always see that these functions are referring to other cells and any change to those cells would change the value over here. For example, if we go and update the price of say pizza to 10, you would see that this change also gets reflected here. Let me change it back to 8. Now consider a situation where you do not want this data to be dynamic. That is, if any change happens at the source, it should not change the data here. For that, you can just copy this and then do a paste special where you have the paste value option. This means that it will only copy the value and not the formula or function. So if I go to the cell, you can see here in the formula bar that it no longer shows a formula or a function which refers another cell, but it is just a plain value. These are just a few of the many common Excel functions. You can find a list of all the Excel functions in the Excel help document. Now let us move on to performing data analysis using Excel. Sorting and filtering in Excel are two powerful tools that can help you to organize and analyze your data. Sorting data allows you to arrange your data in ascending or descending order based on the values in a particular column. For example, you could sort a list of names in alphabetical order, or you could sort a list of numbers in ascending or descending order. So consider this data here that gives me information on the number of pizzas delivered across different branches. Now, if I want to sort this data, I would first need to select the table. I can either do it manually with the help of the mouse by dragging it across the cells, or I can use the keyboard shortcut, which is Ctrl Shift and then right arrow, which highlights the cells till the rightmost column, and then down arrow to select bottommost row. Now go to the Home tab, and here you can see the sort and filter option. Now if I click over here, the first option that you see here sorts the data in alphabetical order or from lowest to highest depending on the type of data in the first column of the array. So if I click on this, you can see that our data is sorted based on the order number. Since it's alphanumeric, it is sorted in the order of alphabets and then numbers. Now if I once again go to sort and filter and click on this custom sort, I can define the column based on which I want to sort my data. For example, if I want to sort the data based on the branch, I will select the sort by parameter as the column branch and then sort it based on cell values. Other than this, if you click here, you can get more options such as cell color, that is if you have color coded the cells, then you can sort your data based on the cell color. Similarly, font color or conditional formatting icon. I will leave it at cell values as of now, and I want the order to be A to Z. Now, once the data is sorted according to the branch value, I want to add another level, so I will click on Add Level here. So after the data is sorted based on branch, I want to further sort it based on the pizza type. Again, I'll sort it based on the cell values and the order as A to Z. Now I'll click OK. Now you can see that the data is sorted first based on the branch. So here you can see Arizona. Then under each branch, it is sorted based on the pizza type. So first it is chicken ball, and then chicken feast, and then so on. So this is how you can do multiple levels of sorting. Now moving on to filtering. So filtering data allows you to display only a subset of your data based on specific criteria. For that as well, we follow the steps similar to sorting. So first select the data, press Ctrl and Shift and then right arrow and then the down arrow. Then I'll go to the same option, that is sort and filter, and then select filter under that. You can also see the shortcut over here. It is always good to get into the habit of using keyboard shortcuts as it would make your work 10 times faster. So I have my range of cells selected. Now I will press Ctrl Shift L altogether, and you can see that the filters are applied to the header of the table. Now if I want to filter my data based on the pizza type, I will click here, and from here, if I want to display the data only for chicken feast, I will first remove all the selections by unchecking the box and then select chicken feast and then click OK. So you can see that all the other rows other than chicken feast are hidden. Similarly, I can display multiple selections. For that, all I need to do is to check the boxes for the type of pizzas that I want to display. So now I have selected 3 pizza types, and when I click OK, the rows corresponding to these 3 pizza types are displayed. From here, I can filter the data further. Suppose I want to display the ones only with the remarks as good for these pizzas. I can do that as well. So just like sort, you can also perform multiple levels of filtering on your data. Now to remove the filter, you can use the same shortcut, that is Ctrl Shift L, or alternatively you can use the clear filter option here. I'll use Ctrl Shift L to remove the filter. Let us now talk about another prominent feature of Excel, which is pivot tables. A pivot table is a data summarization tool that allows you to analyze and explore your data in a variety of ways. It is a powerful tool that can help you to answer questions about your data that would be difficult or impossible to answer using other methods. Now, to use a pivot table in Excel, you first need to select the data that you want to summarize. So let me select this data, Ctrl+Shift+Right key, and then down arrow. And now, once you have selected the data, to create a pivot table, go to the Insert tab and then click on Pivot Table here. Here you can see that it is asking for the table or the range, which in this case is already selected. Then it asks whether you want to create the pivot table in a new worksheet or the existing one. Now, if I select new worksheet and click OK, it will add a new worksheet over here, which will have the pivot table. Else, if you select the existing worksheet, you have to specify the location or basically cell where you want your pivot table. In this example, I will go with new worksheet and click on OK. So you can see that this is the new worksheet that has been created for our pivot table, and right now the pivot table stage is empty. Here is where we will build our report. To build the report, we have to click Choose the Fields, which you can see on the right hand side. So here are the fields. So these are nothing but the headers of the table that we selected. Here is the area where we want to place the headers according to the pivot table that we want to build. So to add the fields, you just have to drag and drop them to the required area below. For example, I can drag and drop this field, pizza type, to the row or the column as per my need. Or you can just check the box next to the required field, for example, branch. And it automatically got added under the row. And you can see that our pivot table has started to build. Now, next, if I select quantity based on the data type, it got added under the values area. So now your pivot table shows the name of the branches and the total quantity sold across each branch. Now, if I select one more field or header, say pizza type, you can see that it displays the data in a manner that under each branch, it shows the different types of pizza and the quantity sold for each of them. Now you're free to move the fields across the areas if you want to make changes to the way the data is displayed on the pivot table. For example, if I move the pizza type under the columns area, the pivot table would display the data like this. So instead of rows, the pizza type is spread across columns. Now I will try another change, that is move the pizza type under rows and branch under columns, which will give the result as you can see here. As this gives a more compact view, I would leave it at that. So this way we can play around to find the best output as per our requirement. Now suppose I want to add a filter to this table based on certain criteria, that is remarks. So I will drag and drop the remarks field under the filter area. You can see that the filter has been added here. Right now it shows all the remarks. If I click here, it shows two options, 0 and good. So I will select good and click OK. So these are the ones that have the remarks marked as good. Now if you want to select more than one filter criteria, you can check this box and make your selections. For the time being, I'll change it back to all. So with the help of pivot tables, it becomes very easy to play around with your data and find out the best way to summarize and present your data. For example, I want to find out the quantity of chicken balls sold in the California branch. With this kind of summarized data in front of us, we can quickly know that it is 119. And what is the total number of chicken balls sold across all the regions? It is 472. It is that easy. Now when I click outside the pivot table stage, you can see that the pivot table field has disappeared. Now to bring that back, just click anywhere inside the pivot table and you can see that the pivot tables field is back. Finally, to format a pivot table, just click on this cell and it selects the complete pivot table. Now right click and you can see that we have the format cells, numbers, etc. Now from the same table that we created this pivot table, we can create multiple pivot tables. So these were some of the simple and basic operations that we can perform with the help of pivot tables. And pivot table is one of the very powerful tools in Excel which can help you quickly summarize your data and draw inferences. After learning about the pivot tables, let us now move on to charts and graphs. Charts and graphs are visual representations of data that can help you to understand and communicate your data more effectively. There are many different types of charts and graphs available in Excel, and the best type of chart or graph for your data will depend on the type of data that you have and the message that you want to communicate. So you must keep in mind these factors before choosing a particular chart type. So let us now get started with creating a chart. In the previous exercise, we created a pivot table, which can be seen right now. Now, one way to create a chart is to use this pivot table. So select the pivot table and then go to charts under the insert tab. I will go to the column chart option and select this. You can see that all the fields that were listed in the pivot table are also listed in the chart. For example, the filtering criteria that we set up in the pivot table shows here in the chart as well. So when I select the option good in the chart here, you can see that the pivot table also gets filtered accordingly. Let me now bring it back to the original state. Next, we have the branch details in the legends. So these are legends over here. Then under the x-axis, we have the pizza type. And then we have the sum of quantity. Each bar here is the value, which is the total quantity sold for each pizza type, and color coding here shows the quantity per region. If you hover over this bar, you can easily identify the region, pizza type, and the quantity sold for that category. For instance, here it says Oregon, and the type of pizza is chicken feast, and the quantity sold is 156. So by hovering over each block, you can get the exact details, and just looking at this chart gives you a high-level overview of the distribution of sales across different regions for each pizza type. So here we created the chart with the help of a pivot table that we had already created. Now another way to create a chart or graph in Excel is to select the data that you want to chart or graph. Once you have selected the data, you can create a chart or graph by clicking on the Insert tab, and then in the Charts group, click on the type of chart or graph that you want to create. Or you can go to the Recommended Charts option, as Excel can help you select the best chart based on the data that you have selected. So in this case, I will go with the clustered column chart and then click on OK. So the chart here shows the total number of pizzas sold across each branch without any breakup for the pizza types. Here on the right side, we have the pivot chart fields where we can make changes to the chart by adding or removing fields under various areas. For example, I can move the branch field under the legend area and pizza type under the categories or axis. So here each color represents a particular branch. So if we look at the category BBQ chicken, we can see that it is sold only in the Oregon region and the total value is 445. And the same can be verified from the table here. The BBQ Philly steak is sold only in the Nevada region as we can see in the table as well. Now, if we look at chicken ball, it is sold in 3 regions and so on. Now, if you want, you can also change the chart type by right-clicking on it and selecting the Change Chart Type option. So under the column chart type, I will select this stacked column chart and click on OK. I find this view to be better and more easy to understand. So based on how you want to present your data, you can choose the chart type accordingly. So here we have the filter based on the pizza type. The x-axis shows the pizza type, y-axis shows the quantity, and the bars show the breakup of the type of pizza sold across each region. Now, like we had in the other chart, if you want to add a remarks filter to the chart, you can drag and drop that field under the filter area. So if now I filter the chart as per the remarks good, that is where the quantity sold is more than 150, this is how it would look like. Let me revert it. So that is how you can create a chart. Once you have created your chart, you can also customize your chart. For that, right-click on the chart and then select Format Chart Area. On the right side, you can see Format Chart Area. Here you can find different options to format your chart. So you can play around with it, make changes and see how your chart looks like. Or if you just want to change the font, you can right-click and then select Font here. I'll cancel it for the time being. It is just to make you aware that you have all these options available to format your chart. And as I said earlier, when creating a chart, you can either go with the Excel recommended chart in the chart panel under the Insert tab or other chart options as per your need. Other than these, you can see the Pivot Chart Analyze, which has more advanced options. Here you can add more features to your chart, but since this is a beginner level course, I will not venture out much into it and stick to the basics as of now. Moving ahead, let us talk about the most commonly used charts and graphs in Excel. For that, I will once again go to the Insert tab. The first one you see here is the column chart. These are used to show changes in data over time. Bar charts are similar to column charts, but they are used to show comparisons between different categories of data. Then we have the line or area charts that are used to show trends in data over time. Next, the pie charts are used to show the parts of a whole. And the scatter charts are used to show the relationship between two sets of data. So selecting between these charts depends upon the data that you have and what is that you want to communicate with that data. Let me go back to the sales sheet. Now if we go to the Home tab, you can see the Analyze Data option over here. This feature is available with Excel 2010 and higher versions. If you click over here, you would get the benefits of data analysis at a single click, and there are some predefined templates that you can make use of. So based on the data that you have, there are over 28 types of insights for this data. Here you also have the option to ask a question and perform analysis on your data. So when I click over here, it has suggested some questions on its own based on the data that we have selected. For example, percentage distribution of branch, distribution of order number by pizza type, etc. Other than that, you have pre-built pivot table, chart, pivot chart, etc. So for example, if I want to showcase the price per quantity by branch, I can insert that pivot chart with a single click. So when I click, it has created a new sheet called Suggestion, which has the pivot chart. So each branch here has 2 bars for remarks, one for 0 and one for good. It also has the corresponding pivot table in the same worksheet. Under the Analyze Data section, you can see that it has 28 more suggestions. So this way, the Analyze Data option helps you to present data in different ways instantaneously. These come really handy, especially for beginners or those who are new to data analysis. Now let us talk about some advanced features provided by Excel. Now that we have got a fair idea about visualization using pivot tables and charts, let us now move on to macros. A macro is a sequence of commands that you can record and then run later to automate tasks in Excel. Macros can save you time and effort, and they can also help you to create consistent results. To use macros in Excel, you have to first enable the Developer tab if you do not have it already. As we can see, we do not have a Developer tab yet over here. So to add this, go to File, then Options, and then select Customize Ribbon. Now under the Main tab, select the Developer checkbox. So whatever options are checked over here are the ones that you see here. Now when I click OK here, you can see that the Developer tab is added to the ribbon. Now to understand the macros better, let us do an exercise. You can see that I have added 2 sheets here, one representing the sale of pizzas across different branches in the month of January, and the other one is for the month of February. Now click on the Developer tab. In the code group, you can see the macros option. When you click on this, you should ideally be able to see all the macros created for this worksheet. You cannot see anything listed now because there is no macro created for this specific workbook. So let us look at how we can create a macro. For that, let me close this first. As I said earlier, macros help you to perform a series of repetitive steps with just a click of a button. So if there is a particular action that needs to be performed again and again, you can code it as a macro and then just run that macro when and where needed. For example, I have my sales for the month of January here. Now from this sales report, I want to find out the instances where the quantity sold is more than 200. Now since this is something that I would like to perform every time I receive a sales report, I will capture it as a macro. For that, click on the Record Macro button. In the macro name box, enter a name for the macro. I will name it as format underscore quantity. Remember that you cannot leave any blank space when giving your macro a name. So I have used an underscore here. You can also add a shortcut key for quick access to your macro. For example, I will give it as Ctrl T. If you want a combination of Shift key as well, you can press Shift and then T. So now the shortcut for this macro will be Ctrl Shift T. In the Store Macro in box, select the workbook where you want to store the macro. I will leave it at this workbook only. Under the description box, you can add a short description of what your macro does if you want. Here I will put color code cells for quantity greater than 200. And finally, I'll click OK. Now you can see here that we got a message saying that it should be saved in a macro-enabled workbook. If you remember, we talked about different extensions of an Excel workbook. Now by default, this workbook is saved with a .xlsx extension. To change it to a macro-enabled workbook, use the .xlsm extension. Now it shows as a macro-enabled workbook. So remember that unless your workbook is saved as a macro-enabled workbook or the one with a .xlsm extension, you cannot work on macros. Now I will click on Save, and you can see that that message is gone, and this is a copy of our .xlsx workbook, this time saved as a macro-enabled workbook. Now as you can see here, it shows stop recording. This means that Excel will record the actions that we are going to perform on this data now on. So I will start with selecting the quantity, and I want to highlight the cells where the quantity is greater than 200. After selecting these cells, that is column D, I will click on the Home tab, and here under Conditional Formatting, I will go to the Highlight Cell Rules, and you can see that there are various rules listed over here. The one that I am going to select is greater than, and once I click on that, here I would say that I want to format cells that are greater than 200, and then I can select the formatting of my choice. For the time being, I'll leave it at the default one and then click on OK. Now under the quantity column, you can see that the figures that are greater than 200 have been highlighted. Now once I am done, I will go back to the Developers tab and stop the macro recording. Now this is a task that I want to perform every time I have a sales report. So instead of doing these steps every time, I can make use of the macro that I just created. So suppose I have received the sales report for the month of February, and now I want to do the same exercise on that. So either I can go to the Developer tab, and if I click on macro, I can see the macro I created just now, that is format quantity. So all the macros that you create will get listed over here, and you can select the one that you want. So right now you can either select the macro from here and click on Run, or since we have saved a shortcut for this macro, we can directly use that. So it is Ctrl-Shift-T. And you can see that the macro is run, and all the steps that we performed earlier are repeated here in a single step. And it has highlighted all the instances where the quantity is more than 200. Now if you want to clear the rules that are applied on some cells, select those cells, go to the Home tab, and under Conditional Formatting, go to Clear Rules, and you can either clear the rules from the entire sheet or the selected cells. For the time being, I'll say clear rules from the selected cells, and you can see that the formatting is gone. Now that we understand the working of macros, let us look at another interesting feature of Microsoft Excel, which is VBA or Visual Basic for Applications. If you look over here under the Developer tab, you can see Visual Basic, and when you click on it, you land on the Visual Basic editor. So VBA is a programming language that is used to automate tasks in Excel. VBA is a powerful tool that can be used to create macros, custom functions, and user interfaces. Now let me close this for the time being. And from here, if I go to macros, you can see that this is the macro that we created in our previous exercise. Now if I select this and click on Edit, you can see the code for that particular macro. So for all the steps that we performed, Excel automatically converted those two lines of code. So as you can see here, here is the name of the macro, that is format quantity, and here are the steps in the form of codes. So the advantage of working with macros is that we do not have the need to understand the complexity of coding to automate any task. All we have to do is to record our steps, and the codes will get created in the background. But if you are someone who is already good at coding or understands the programming language, can directly use the editor and add codes that can be called in our Excel workbook. Now let us look at how to write a code in the Visual Basic editor by creating a very simple function. For that, click on the Insert menu and select Module. This is where you can write your code. Now for example, I want to create a function to add two numbers. So I will start with typing function, which says that we are going to create a function. Then I will name my function as my function. And I will provide the arguments in brackets, which are x and y. And then press enter. As soon as I press enter, you can see that it has already added end function to our code, which declares the end of the function. So it is the basic structure of the function. So just like you start the function, you must also end it systematically. And so you must end a function with end function. Now let's define what the function is going to do. So my function is equal to x plus y. So the code here defines a function called my function. The function takes two arguments x and y and returns the sum of x and y. Now I need to save this and then I'll close this. Then I'll also close the VBA and go back to our worksheet. Now let us try calling the function that we just created. It is just like using any other function that is already there in Excel. So we start with an equal to sign and then write my, and then you can see my function being listed here. Now hit the tab and let's say the arguments that I want to give are 5 and 9. So 5, 9, then close the bracket and enter. So we can see that the function my function has calculated the sum of the numbers that we entered because that was what we had defined under my function. So this was a very simple example just to make you understand how to create and then call a function. You can create a function as complex as you require and you can easily call that in Excel. And just like macros, you can save these only in a macro-enabled workbook. Some things must be kept in mind when creating a function of your own. To understand these better, let me go over here and open the code for the function that I just created. The first thing is that the name of the function must start with a letter and can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. You can see that the function name contains only letters and can also have numbers and underscores. Next, the arguments of the function must be declared in the function header, as can be seen here. The body of the function must contain the code that performs the calculation. So in this case, this single line of code is the body of this function. And finally, as we already talked about, the function must end with an end function statement. So this is how the structure of a function should be. You can also make use of the help menu in the VBA to get help with VBA syntax and functions. There are also many resources available online that can help you learn VBA. Now let us talk about Excel templates. As we have already seen, if you go to File, you will be able to find some pre-built templates from which you can choose as per your requirement. But you also have the option to create a custom or personalized templates, and let us look at how we can do that. So for that, I have opened a new Excel workbook. Now one way to do this is to first select any ready-made template. So say I select the teacher's to-do list and then click on create here. This opens up a new workbook with the same name as the template, teacher's to-do list. And now you can make some changes to it. For example, if I do not want the date columns, I can delete these. Let me undo this. Or if I want to change the heading of any of the columns or make any other changes, like changing any text, graphics, or formatting, I can also do that. And then save this as a new template. Another way is to create a new template from scratch. For that, I have opened a new workbook and I will create a template for my day-to-day expenses. So I will name the first column header as date, another column for description, then the expense type, and then the amount. And just so that I can see the headers properly, I'll double click at the end of these columns so that it expands as per the length of the header. Now I will do a Ctrl Shift right arrow to select all the cells and make the text bold and make the cell color as light green. Then I would like to add border to the cells in my table. So I will select all the cells under these column header, or I can also select only a few cells where I want to apply the border. So once selected, I will go to the borders option under fonts and then select all borders. So it has now added borders to all the cells. Next, I will create a list for the type of expenses. So I'll type in category wise expenses. Under this, I'll add home for any expenses related to home, kids, then grocery, electricity, and miscellaneous. So let us assume that these are the types of expenses that I incur every month. I'll change this to expense type just to avoid any confusion, because that is the column header that I have here. Now I want the cells under the column expense type to have entries only from this list of expense types. For this, what I can do is I can format these cells as list. So I will select this cell, go to the data tab, and then click on data validation here, and then select data validation. In the pop-up box here, I will change the validation criteria to list. That means only allow values from a list. Then I must define the source of the list, that is from which list or range of cells should the value be allowed. So once I click over here, I can go and select the range and then click on OK. So now you can see that there is a drop down on the cell here, and if you click here, you can see that whatever is defined under the expense type on the right is what appears here, and you can fill the cell by selecting only one of these. So anytime you add anything to the list, you can include that as well in the drop down. And if you modify anything here, say for example, I change kids to school, the same gets reflected here. So it makes sure that we have the exact same entry that we have here. Why do I want it the exact same way? Because I now want to define a condition in the column next to this to calculate the sum of these expenses category wise. To understand it better, let me add some entries to this table. So on 1st January 2023, I bought a chair. So I will mark it under the expense type home, and the amount for this is 500. Then on January 2nd, I buy vegetables. Now I don't see a drop down here since I did not copy the formatting of the cell above. So let me do that for all the cells in this column. So I will click on this cell, go to the Home tab and then click on Format Painter and then paste the formatting on the required cells. Another way is to copy the cell C2 and simply paste it across cells like this. Now you can select the cells and press delete to clear the current entries in the cells, but it will still retain the drop down to select from. So for the second one, I'll click on the drop down and select grocery and the amount spent is 75. The next expense is on the same day, so I will do a Control D to copy the above cell, and let's say that on that day I had to pay the school fee. So the expense type will be school and say the amount is 150. And then on January 3, 2023, I buy cereals. Under the expense type, I will start typing G and you can see that it has automatically filled in grocery for me. The amount spent, let's say, is 50. Now, if you try typing in something else that is not in the list, you will get an error message saying that this value does not match the data validation restriction defined for this cell. So I will cancel it. Next, as I said, I want to calculate the total expense for each category. So every time a new line item is added, Excel will automatically calculate the sum and update the total expenses here. So I will start with an equal to sign and then SUMIF. The SUMIF function is used when you want to calculate the sum based on certain conditions. Now the first argument for the SUMIF is range. Range here is the expense type, which is column C. Comma. The next is the criteria. That means the value in the range should match the entry in cell I7, comma, and then the sum range. That is the values that need to be added, which is under the amount column. So I will select column D. Then close the bracket and press enter. So it has now calculated the sum of all the entries under the expense type home. Now I want to copy this formula in the cells below it. So I'll just drag this down. You can see that there is no entry for electricity and miscellaneous and hence the sum is 0. For grocery, you can see that it shows 125, which is the sum of these two instances, 75 and 50. So with each entry in the table, the total expense across each category will keep on getting updated. Now to save this workbook as a template, go to the File tab, click Save As, give it a name. I will name it as My Personal Budget. Next, select the Excel template file format, that is .xltx. You can see that the template is getting stored in my OneDrive personal folder. You must make sure that this destination address is same as the default template location of this application. Now to confirm that, go to Options here. Under the Excel options, click on Save. Here you can see that the default location is the custom office template inside the Documents folder, which is different from where our template is getting saved currently. So what I'll do is, I'll copy this location, Close this and again go to the Save As option. Give the name. Change the extension. And then I'll change the destination location. So I'll paste here the location that I copied earlier and then save it. Now I'll open a new workbook and let me close this file. Now if I click on File and then on New, you can see that my personal budget is listing under the templates. If we hadn't changed the location that we did just now, it will not get listed here. So these are the recent templates that we accessed. Apart from that, if you go to the Personal tab here, you will be able to see all the templates that we create over here. Right now we have only one, so it shows only that. Now if I click it, it opens the template that we just created. So you can clear the entries in the table here and then add the expenses for the next month. Now here are some additional tips for creating custom templates in Excel. You can use the template wizard to help you create a template. You can save your templates in a central location so that they are easy to find and use. You can share your template with other users by saving them as a file attachment or by uploading them to a file sharing service. And here are some examples of custom templates that you can create in Excel. You can create a contact list template that can be used to store contact information for your customers or clients. You can create a to-do list template that you can use to keep track of your tasks. A project plan template that can be used to track the progress of your projects. A report template that you can use to create reports for your colleagues or clients, and the list is endless. There are a few ways to share and collaborate on Excel spreadsheets. Let us look at some of the most common methods. Sharing a file through email is the simplest way to share a spreadsheet with others. Simply open the spreadsheet that you want to share, click on the File tab, and then select Share. Here, when you click on the first option, Share with People, you can see something like this. Here you can enter the email address of the person with whom you want to share it. So I will enter an email address here. Now I can edit the level of access by clicking on this link. Here I can restrict the access of this file to specific people by adding their email IDs, or I can leave it open for anyone with the link. Under More settings here, you can either let the recipient edit the worksheet or restricting them to just viewing the sheet. They will not be able to make any changes to the sheet. Now this date option here lets you set an expiry to the access to the sheet. So suppose I choose 14th October. It means that the recipient will have access to this file only till 14th October. Apart from this, you can also add password to your file to add one more level of protection. You can share the password with the intended recipient so that they can open the file. Now let me cancel this. Now once again, if I go to the Share option under File, you can see the option to share it via email. So you can share it as an attachment, a link, or a PDF and so on. But for this, you need to have Outlook configured on your system. Other than that, you can also directly convert it into a PDF and share it as a link. Now, when there are multiple collaborators, you must make use of the version control mechanism to keep track of the changes made to the worksheet. For that, you can go to the Info and then go to the version history option here. When you click on that, you can see that right now there is only one name because it was handled by just one person. But in case of multiple users, you will be able to see who made the changes and also the date and time of the changes. The version control system is useful in case the file gets corrupted or is accidentally deleted, or if a mistake is made or undesirable changes are introduced. Version control systems allow you to roll back to a previous version of the Excel file. So suppose I want to roll it back to the version as on 16 July. I can click over here and it goes to the state it was on that particular date and time. Another important feature is comments. It can be used to communicate with other collaborators about changes that you have made to the spreadsheet. So I can go to the Insert tab, and then when I click on Comment, it opens up a comment box on the cell where my cursor was. Here I can put a comment, say, kindly check the value if that is what I want the other collaborator to do. And if needed, I can also assign it to someone specific or leave it for anyone who logs into the spreadsheet. I can also add multiple comments at a time. So I will go to another sheet and add a comment by right clicking, and then I will add a dummy comment. Now to have a look at all the open comments in this worksheet, you can click on comments here and then navigate to see other comments. I can then either reply to the comment or close it if it is resolved, and thereby keep a track of whether the comments have been addressed or not. So these are some of the basic features that you must make use of when you share and collaborate on Excel spreadsheets.